Hi everybody, welcome back to Chapter 9. In this exercise, we'll practice calculating wages subject to the following taxes: FICA Social Security tax, FICA Medicare tax, and FUTA and SUTA taxes. It's important to realize that we are not calculating the actual tax. We are calculating the wages for the month of November subject to each of these taxes. As always, I strongly recommend that you download and print the PDF worksheets that accompany this lecture, or download the Excel workbook so that you can follow along with the video and practice calculating wages subject to employment taxes. As explained in the textbook and in our previous video, certain taxes are imposed on each employee's gross wage up to a wage base. Once an employee's cumulative gross wage exceeds the wage base, that employee's wages are exempt from that tax for the rest of the calendar year. The wage base for Social Security tax usually changes each year. For 2018, it was $128,400. The FICA Medicare tax is imposed on all gross wages without limitation. The FUTA and California SUTA wage base has remained at $7,000 for many years. Let's take a look at the schedule. We are given the following information. The FUTA and SUTA taxable wage base is $7,000. The FICA Social Security taxable wage base is $128,400. We are given each employee's name, their year-to-date gross wage through October 31st, and gross wages to be paid for the month of November. Our job is to calculate gross wages for the month of November that are subject to each type of tax. It is very important to understand that the year-to-date gross wages have already been paid to the employee, and all payroll taxes on the year-to-date gross wages have already been paid. The only reason we need the year-to-date gross wage column is to see if employees have exceeded or are bumping up against a wage base. I think this concept will become clear as we work through the exercise. Let's practice. Kathleen. Before November, Kathleen had already been paid $126,700 in gross wage. This is not quite in excess of the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400, but it's close. By the time November wages of $7,000 are paid, she will exceed the wage base. So some of her November wages will be subject to FICA Social Security tax, and some will be exempt. The easiest way to make this calculation is to subtract the prior year-to-date wages from the wage base. That will calculate the remaining salary subject to FICA Social Security tax for the rest of the year. The wage base of $128,400 minus $126,700 of prior wages on which tax has already been fully paid equals $1,700 of wages still subject to FICA Social Security tax. The rest of her gross wages are exempt from FICA Social Security tax, so put $1,700 in the FICA Social Security wages column. There is no limit on FICA Medicare wages and Medicare tax, so all $7,000 of Kathleen's November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax. Put $7,000 in the FICA Medicare wages column. The FUTA and SUTA wage base is $7,000. Kathleen's year-to-date gross wages through October 31st exceeds that amount, so all FUTA and SUTA tax has already been paid for Kathleen prior to November, and therefore her November wages are exempt from those taxes. So put 0 in the FUTA, SUTA wages column for Kathleen. Let's do Anthony. Before November, Anthony had already earned $6,800 in gross wage. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400. Accordingly, all $500 of his gross wage for the month of November is subject to FICA Social Security tax. So put $500 in the FICA Social Security wages column. Oops. There is no limit on wages subject to FICA Medicare tax. So all $500 of Anthony's November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax. So put $500 in the FICA Medicare wages column. Before November, Anthony had already earned $6,800 in gross wages. This is not quite in excess of the FUTA, SUTA wage base of $7,000, but it's close. By the time the November wage of $500 is paid, he will exceed the wage base. So some of his November wages will be subject to FUTA and SUTA tax, and some will be exempt. The easiest way to make that calculation is to subtract the prior year-to-date gross from the wage base. That will calculate the remaining salaries subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for the rest of the year. $7,000 wage base minus the $6,800 on which he has already fully paid tax equals $200 of wages still subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for the rest of the year. The rest of his gross wages are exempt from FUTA and SUTA tax, so put $200 in the FUTA and SUTA wages column. Nicole. Before November, Nicole had already earned $15,000 in gross wage. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400. Accordingly, all of her $2,500 of gross wage in the month of November is subject to FICA Social Security tax, so put $2,500 in the FICA Social Security wages column. There is no limit to the amount of wages on which FICA Medicare tax is charged, so all of Nicole's $2,500 of November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax. Put $2,500 in the FICA Medicare wages column. Before November, Nicole had already earned $15,000 in gross wage. This is in excess of the FUTA and SUTA wage base of $7,000. Accordingly, all FUTA and SUTA tax has already been paid for Nicole, and all of her November wages are exempt from FUTA and SUTA tax. So put 0 in her FUTA and SUTA wages column. Let's skip down and do Gracie next. Before November, Gracie had already earned $5,000 in gross wage. This is not even close to the FICA Social Security wage base of $128,400. Accordingly, all of her $1,500 of gross wage for the month of November is subject to FICA Social Security tax, so put $1,500 in the FICA Social Security wages column. There is no limit on wages subject to FICA Medicare tax, so all $1,500 of Gracie's November salary is subject to FICA Medicare tax, so put $1,500 in the FICA Medicare wages column. Before November, Gracie had already earned $5,000 in gross wage. This is not in excess of the FUTA and SUTA wage base of $7,000. Are any of her November wages subject to FUTA and SUTA tax? Let's check it out. $7,000 minus $5,000 equals $2,000 of wages still subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for the rest of the year. But her gross wage for November is only $1,500. So even after payment of her November salary, she will not have exceeded FUTA and SUTA wage base. Therefore, all of her November wages are subject to FUTA and SUTA tax, so put $1,500 in the FUTA and SUTA wages column. Please pause this video and finish the worksheet for the rest of the employees. When you're done, start the video again to check your answers. Did you get them all right? If any of your answers do not agree with mine, please pause the video and examine my calculations to see if you can spot and fix your error. It is important that you understand these basic calculations before we continue with more advanced payroll problems. So please do not hesitate to send me a message through Canvas if you have any questions. Well, that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll calculate the employer's payroll tax expense for a simple payroll and write the related journal entry. See you next time.